Monday morning, they hauled off my father's old F-250 while I was setting out the folding chairs for our neighborhood's Memorial Day gathering. Left a neon orange tow notice flapping on my front door. Calder Voss, homeowner since 17, still had the binder from my HOA's last budget audit sitting on my desk. Ever seen someone push their authority a little too far and not realize the paper trail's already waiting? It was the kind of Monday that tricks you into thinking nothing can go wrong. The light was soft through the live oaks, the air warm enough to carry the smell of someone's breakfast bacon. And I was half thinking about taking the old F-250 out past the bait and tackle store for a coffee before heading into town. The driveway was empty. I stopped at the edge of the porch like my boots had hit an invisible fence. The space where my father's truck should have been was bare concrete pale where the sun hadn't yet touched it. A bright orange square flapped against the front door in the breeze. Vehicle towed in bold block letters. Rhett came out behind me, yawning phone already in his hand. What the? I peeled the notice off the door, feeling the cheap paper give under my fingers. Someone had written the number $60 in thick black marker in the reason box. The fine print explained outstanding HOA dues. Vehicle impounded per order of the HOA board. There was a phone number at the bottom underlined twice. I called. A bored voice answered, identified the place as a private tow yard on the edge of town, and told me I could collect the truck for $240 plus the $60 dues. Cash or card, but cash is faster, he added. Like that was a courtesy. Rhett raised his phone slightly, recording without being obvious. Ask them who called it in, he murmured. HOA. President herself, the man said when I pressed. Lady named, Loretta Kincaid. She sounded in a hurry. I kept my voice level, thanked him for the information, and told Rhett to grab his wallet if he wanted to ride along. The tow lot sat behind a chain-link fence topped with rusted barbed wire. Sunlight flashed off rows of dented cars. Inside, the air smelled faintly of rubber and burnt coffee. The attendant slid a clipboard across the counter without looking up from his paperwork. Sign, here. Initial there, he said. Keys are on the dash. You'll need to pay before we move it out. I signed, paid, and took the crumpled receipt. Rhett was still filming, and I caught a snippet of the attendant telling someone on the phone, yeah, it was the HOA president again. He didn't notice us leave. Driving back, we passed the community center. Its side door was propped open, and the low hum of conversation drifted out. On the long table inside, just visible from the sidewalk, sat a thick binder. The dark green cover was stamped with a gold seal that caught the light, and the spine bowed slightly from years of papers crammed inside. The top corner was bent like someone had dropped it. The label read, HOA Budget Report. Loretta Kincaid stepped out of the room just then, head down, clutching a phone. She didn't see me looking. I slowed, the truck glanced once more at that binder, and kept driving. At home, I laid the orange notice and the receipt side by side on the kitchen table. The numbers stared back $60 overdue, $240 release fee. Rhett leaned against the counter watching me. I could feel the questions he wasn't asking. I took a slow breath and slid both papers into the drawer where we kept warranties and old tax returns. Not today, I said. That night over dinner, Rhett finally leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low. So, you're just going to let her get away with it? I didn't answer right away. The hum of the refrigerator filled the pause, and outside the wind moved in the live oaks like distant surf. That evening, after the dishes were stacked in the sink and the hum of the dishwasher filled the kitchen, I went to the filing cabinet in the corner of my home office. The drawer stuck a little like it always did, and I tugged until it gave way with a metallic sigh. A manila folder labeled HOA 2017 sat toward the back, the edges curling from years of neglect. I pulled it out and laid the original bylaws on the desk, their faint smell of toner mixing with the warm scent of Rhett's reheated barbecue drifting in from the kitchen. The laptop screen glowed pale blue against the lamplight. I opened my email and began pulling up every message from Loretta Kincaid. The subject lines marched down the inbox like little warning flags. Reminder. Spring dues, updated guidelines, community, safety. Notice. Rhett padded in barefoot, carrying a plate, and leaned against the doorway. You gonna read every single one, he asked between bites. Every single one, I said, not looking up. I cross-checked the bylaws against the HOA's recent updated rules posted online. The packet from when I'd bought the house in 2017 was clear, no provision for towing a vehicle over a small debt. Fines, yes. Late fees, yes. But nothing about calling a tow truck because someone owed $60. The desk began to fill with paper. I printed Loretta's emails and ran a yellow highlighter over dates and dollar amounts. The stack grew into a lopsided tower on the left side of the desk. Rhett took his empty plate back to the kitchen, then reappeared with his phone. "We should record the next meeting," he said. "You know, for posterity." Maybe I replied. The printer hummed again. On the screen, Loretta's latest community-wide email sat open. Attached at the bottom, almost like an afterthought, was a PDF, budget 2022.pdf. I clicked it. The file loaded slowly, each page filled with tables and small font notes. My eyes scanned for anything that didn't fit, and a few figures in the landscaping column caught my attention, numbers bigger than they had any right to be. I saved the file to a new folder labeled HOA. Evidence slid a copy onto a thumb drive and ejected it with a satisfying click. Rhett's restless tapping on the desk made the highlighter roll toward me. I picked it up, drew a line under budget 202022.pdf in my notes, and said, "We'll need Benton's eyes on this." Rhett tilted his head. Tonight, I reached for the phone. Tonight, Benton Marek showed up at my door with a leather briefcase and the kind of look you only see on men who've read too many balance sheets. He didn't bother with small talk. He just tipped his hat, stepped over the threshold, and scanned the room like it was a ledger. Saturday light slanted through the blinds, striping the living room table I'd already buried under printouts, sticky notes, and a half-tamed stack of bylaws. "Coffee?" I asked. "If it's honest," he said, and cracked a tired smile. I poured 2 mugs while he set the briefcase down and tugged the zipper with a practiced hand. Inside sat an old solar calculator, its plastic yellowed at the edges, and a binder clip fat with clippings. He took the calculator out like a carpenter picking up a favorite hammer, then drew the HOA budget binder toward him. The dark green cover had warped a little humidity neglect or both, and a brown ring from someone's cup stained the embossed seal. Benton thumbed it open slow as a judge lifting a gavel. "Careless hands," he murmured, rubbing the edge of the stain with his thumb. "You can tell a lot about a shop by the smudges on its tools." He began at the back, which struck me as odd, until he said, "People hide the truth where they think no one's looking. Appendices, footnotes, the little places accountants visit for sport." He licked a finger and flipped another page. The calculator clicked to life with a faint beep. Rhett wandered in long enough to swipe a kolache from a bakery box on the counter and lift a silent eyebrow at Benton. I waved him off. "We're working." Benton tapped a column labeled Grounds Enhancement. "Here." I leaned in. Last year's number blinked up at me from the table mid-5 figures. This year, the amount had doubled cleanly like someone leaned on the zero key. "Inflation," I offered. He gave me a look. "Grass doesn't inflate that fast." He penciled 2 figures in my legal pad, scratched a line between them, and set the calculator clicking. "What's your lot assessment again?" "Large corner parcel," I said. "When Dad bought the place, the HOA decided to fold the storm drain and easement into our line item. It's followed the property ever since." Benton added a few more numbers, then turned the pad toward me. 43%, he said. "Your single parcel accounts for 43% of the HOA's total income." I let that sit. The house creaked the way it does when it remembers you're listening. Outside, a mockingbird tried on 3 different songs, couldn't decide, and started over. Willa drifted through the doorway with a foil-covered tray and the sensible shoes of someone who never pretends not to be busy. "Brought kolaches," she said, setting them beside the printer. "Don't mind me." Then, to Benton. "You tell him about the scholarship yet?" Benton's eyes didn't leave the page. "Was about to." Willa turned to me. "We used to have a small scholarship, $500 for any senior from the subdivision headed to community college. Nothing dramatic, but it meant something. Disappeared a couple years back." Loretta said, "reallocated." She made air quotes like she was pinching a gnat. Never saw a vote. Benton grunted and returned to the binder. The coffee ring seemed louder each time he turned a page, a brown halo around the seal that should have meant order. He stopped again this time at a memo tucked into a sleeve. What vendor summary? New landscaping contractor on retainer. He squinted. No competitive bids listed. Odd thing for a board that loves to say best practices out loud. We spread the papers wider. My living room table turned into a topographical map of small-town governance, peaks of invoices, valleys of meeting minutes, rivers of email printouts running between. Benton laid the calculator on the pad and started creating columns year-over-year dues reserve contributions actual versus projected spend. His handwriting was surprisingly neat for a man his age, a gentle rightward slant that still cared about margins. "Look here," he said, drawing a bracket around the landscaping line. "This isn't a one-year blip, it's a slope. Grows by 10%, then 15%, then that jump. But the reserve contributions? Flat to down. If you were running a business, you wouldn't starve your reserves while feeding your lawn. I'm not sure Loretta thinks of it like a business, I said. That he replied is the problem. Willa set a kolache by my elbow and one by Benton's calculator. Eat before you two forget, she said, and fussed with the curtains to let in more light. She paused at the binder, frowning at the stain. That, from the community center figures. They never put coasters out anymore. Benton closed the binder halfway and eyed the cover again. Something else he said almost to himself. A document like this should have sign initials treasurer, president, secretary on the summary page. I see one signature scrawl, and it's the same hand as 3 memos in here. Consolidation of authority, masquerading as efficiency. He reopened to the center where a stapled packet of Grounds Enhancement Plan Phase 2 bore a draft watermark. Phase 2 implies Phase 1 was visible to someone, he said. Were you ever asked to vote on Phase 1? No, I said. We voted on new speed bumps and holiday lighting. The rest was board discretion within budget. Which would be fine, he said, if the budget were honest. He took a long, slow sip of coffee, then looked at me over the rim. I want to hold on to this, he said, laying a possessive hand on the binder. Do a deeper review. Photocopy where I need to. I'm not fond of stains on official documents, and I'm even less fond of what causes them. What causes them? Rhett had reappeared anchored by the smell of pastry. People rushing, Benton said. Rushing leads to sloppiness. Sloppiness leads to error. And error, when money's involved, leads wherever lazy minds want it to go. He gathered the pages he'd scattered all precision again and slid the binder toward his briefcase as if rescuing a patient. I'll log chain of custody and bring you copies, he said, in case anyone decides to ask where the report went. Willa leaned an elbow on the chair back. Chain of custody, she repeated with a hint of pride. That's why I married him. Benton ignored the tease and summarized what we had like a man packing a kit inflated ground spending. Reserve starvation, missing signatures, vendor without bids, a vanished scholarship that once anchored goodwill. He circled 43% again on my pad, thick enough to dent the paper. Loretta's not just posturing, he said finally. She's steering. Steering where Rhett asked. Benton let the silence stretch until even the mockingbird settled down. Toward a place where money moves quietly, and quiet money always has a destination. The room felt smaller for a moment. I could hear the ice maker knock in the freezer, the soft tick of the wall clock our breathing. Benton flipped the binder closed and slid it fully into his briefcase, then checked that the latch had caught. I'll start with 5 years of HOA filings, he said, standing. County clerk bank statements, any vendor registrations. We'll see if the names rhyme. He slipped the calculator away. Numbers have a way of telling the same story twice. Willa wiped her hands on a dish towel she must have carried in without my noticing. Speaking of stories, she said, voice casual in the way people use when the news isn't Loretta's been pushing a big landscaping project. Word is, she wants it approved next month, $200,000. Benton and I looked at each other. He didn't nod exactly. He just let his eyelids lower for a heartbeat the way men do when the last missing piece finally slides into place. Rhett slid a folded sheet across our cafe table and didn't speak until my thumb smoothed the crease. The paper wasn't paper at all, but a glossy printout, an image of a check. HOA, Maintenance Reserve, sat typed in the upper left corner. Pay to the order of Loretta Kincaid. The amount in a careful hand would have paid for a semester at the community college Willa kept talking about. The signature, thick, confident pen strokes dragged a tiny tail where the ink had pooled. Condensation ran from our sweet tea glasses and pooled against the photo's edge. Outside, heat rolled off Main Street and sent the flags in front of the antique store into lazy ripples. Early summer in Bourne always made the sidewalks feel soft under your boots. The air looked almost visible, like you could fold it if you tried. "Where'd you get this?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Rhett leaned back proud and a little nervous. "School's printing the 4th of July flyers. They had me drop a stack at the community center." Loretta's door was open. She left a file out, and this was face up on the copier. "I didn't take it," he added, quickly reading my mind. "Just snapped a photo with my phone and printed it at the lab." I lifted the print to the light. The check number matched the format I'd seen on our reserve account statements. The memo line, Phase 2 Advance, was the kind of vague that tries to pass for official. A faint smear of ink near the date told me someone had signed in a hurry. Benton arrived like he always did, on time and already thinking. He slid into the booth, set down his briefcase, and didn't bother with hello. "Show me," he said. Rhett tipped the photo toward him. Benton's breath went out through his nose, not quite a laugh. He took a pen from his shirt pocket and traced the signature in the air, not touching the page, just following the motion. "Same hand as the budget addendum memos," he said after a moment. "These 2 loops, and the little kick on the K, she signs like a person who's been practicing authority." The cafe door chimed. A hush, then the murmur of small-town talk resumed the new dentist on Blanco Road, the storm last week that split a pecan tree behind the post office, rumors about an HOA special disciplinary meeting targeting unnamed residents. Loretta had posted the notice in the lobby. She liked that phrase, disciplinary, like we were schoolchildren, and she still had a ruler. Benton opened his planner and wrote the check number and date. He pulled a thin folder from the briefcase and compared it with a printout I hadn't seen before, monthly balances from the HOA reserve. He tapped the date on the check, then a dip in the chart. There, he said. "Coincidence?" I asked. He shook his head. "Coincidences don't initial themselves." Rhett finished his tea and set the glass down with a soft clack. "So, what now? We have the budget file. We have this. We have people who are fed up. We just wait around until she calls a vote to kick you out for parking wrong." I watched a bead of condensation slide from his glass and cut a wet track across the tabletop grain. "We don't wait," I said. "We prepare." Benton nodded approving. "Multiple angles," he said. "If a tree falls and no one hears it, the tree learns nothing. We'll need audio and a clean visual of any document displayed. 2 recorders separate pockets. Redundancy." Rhett grinned. The kid loved a plan. "I can rig a GoPro in the ficus at the front table," he said. "Battery will last an hour if I kill the indicator lights." "Discreet," I said. "No showmanship." "Discreet," he repeated, mock solemn. We lingered long enough for the sun to slide from white to gold. When we stood, Benton slipped the photo into a clear sleeve and tucked it into the middle of his planner. Not the front, where it could fall, not the back, where it could be bent. "Chain of custody," he said, and my respect for the man grew another notch. At home, the garage was already warm again. The evening had settled into cicadas, and the faint smell of cut grass drifting from somewhere down the block. Rhett pulled the F-250 onto the ramps, and we set a pan under the oil plug. The first black ribbon hit the metal with a satisfying clang. "You know," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, "none of this would have happened if we'd yelled at the tow yard guy. Or banged on Loretta's door. Maybe I said. The socket wrench bit. The stubborn filter loosened. But yelling is fast and empty. Paper is slow and heavy. Heavy wins." He laughed. "You sound like Benton." "Benton sounds like the math," I replied. "And the math doesn't mind if you like it." We checked the belts, then lights, then tire pressure. The ritual made conversation easy. I talked him through what I wanted at the meeting, the angles, the backup phone in his pocket set to record the way to ask a question that invites a public lie instead of a public fight. He listened without interrupting, like when he was small and the world felt too complicated to name. "What if she calls security?" he asked. Then we let the room watch that too. The oil had thinned to a patient drip. A neighbor's dog barked 3 houses over. Someone's radio played a George Strait chorus and cut off mid-line. I thought about the binder, the bent corner, the stained seal, and the way Benton had run his thumb over it like a priest over a worn Bible. There are books you polish and books you use. This one had been used by hands that didn't care if it lasted. We'd make sure it lasted. Rhett slid out from under the bumper a smudge of oil like war paint across his cheekbone. "So the meeting," he said. "We just show up." "We show up," I said, on time and polite. "We sit where we can see faces. We bring copies of what matters, and we keep our voices lower than everyone else's. If you feel your blood rise, think about torque. Steady pressure beats sudden force." He nodded, tasting the phrase. Steady pressure. We cleaned the tools. The clink of wrenches against the tray sounded like punctuation marks. I ladled the used oil into a container and capped it tight. The garage light haloed floating dust. Rhett's breath fogged the narrow beam just enough to make the air visible. There's a point in any job when the pieces begin to lean toward each other, and you can feel the story choosing its ending. I felt it then, quiet, insistent. Benton called as we were putting the ramps away. "One more thing," he said without preamble. "People lie better in generalities. Make her be specific. Dates, authorizations, vendor names. Ask for the page and the line. If she can't find it in front of neighbors, the silence will find her. With this and the budget report," he added, and I could hear the smile in his voice, "we can corner her." I looked at Rhett. He looked at me. The boy raised his eyebrows like a question mark, and I gave a small nod. He wiped his hands, left a dark thumbprint on the rag, and said, "Let's make sure the whole town sees it." The community center smelled faintly of floor wax and rain. The double doors had been propped open to let the heavy air out, but it only drifted from one corner to another, pooling under the fluorescent lights. Folding chairs scraped across linoleum as neighbors wedged themselves into rows. The overflow leaned against walls, arms crossed damp shirt collars sticking to their necks. Loretta stood at the front table with a neat stack of papers and the microphone angled toward her like a confidant. She shuffled the pages with a rhythm that sounded practiced riffle-tap square like a dealer about to stack the deck. Rhett brushed past me casual as a student on an errand. He paused by the ficus near the front, fussed with a leaf, and then drifted off, nodding hello to a couple from our street. From where I sat, the plant looked a shade denser on one side, just enough to suggest a camera the size of a matchbox tucked in behind plastic leaves. He took up a spot 2 rows over with his phone out, filming a school project for history class, local governance, and civic engagement. He had the lanyard to sell it. Benton sat in the back, hands on the head of his cane, the cane tip exactly on a tile corner the way precise men sit when they plan to say nothing until it matters. Every so often, the overheads put a thin halo on his hairline. Otherwise, he was gray on gray eyes, steady. "Good evening," Loretta said, and her voice filled the room with a bit of extra confidence from the cheap amplifier. "We have a full agenda tonight, so I'll ask for patience and order. As you know, our community has standards. Those standards require diligence. Recently, we've encountered difficulty with a handful of uncooperative residents." Murmurs. The row in front of me tightened their shoulders like a single animal. I uncapped my pen and printed the time in the top corner of my notebook. 6:07 p.m. I drew a small box beside it and left it empty. Later, I'd tick it when audio and video lined up. Loretta clicked to a slide. It was mostly bullet points about compliance and quality of life, words that always sound airless after you've paid your dues. Some residents, she continued, seem to believe that the rules apply to everyone else. They drain resources without paying their share. I wrote drain resources at 6:09 p.m., underlining it once. My pulse stayed even. The chair metal pressed cool against my forearms when I leaned forward, then warmer as the room filled. Behind me, someone whispered, "She means Calder," and someone else whispered back, "Don't start." I didn't turn. She moved the meeting along with parliamentary flourishes that felt like choreography, seconded motions, points of order, a tidy rejection of an agenda, addition from a man I knew only by his dog's bark. Each time a hand rose with a question, she let it hover a heartbeat too long before calling on someone else. A woman in a denim jacket spoke about the entrance landscaping. "It looks nice," she said, "but I'm sure we could have done it cheaper." Loretta smiled the way people do at toddlers who've stumbled through a recital. I kept the timestamps and wrote short, neutral phrases. Entrance landscape costs. Denied bids. The pen made a soft burr on the paper. The air made a soft hiss in the vents. The microphone ticked with tiny feedback pops whenever Loretta's bracelets brushed it. Beside the ficus, Rhett shifted weight and caught my eye in profile. He scratched his neck once with the back of his hand, the sign we'd agreed meant everything was running. A man from the cul-de-sac raised his hand and, without waiting to be recognized, stood. "I have a simple question," he said. "Who pays the most dues? I just want to know who exactly is doing all this draining." A ripple of throat clearing. Loretta's smile didn't move, but the skin at her jaw tightened. "We don't discuss individual financial matters in public," she said. "It's confidential and immaterial to tonight's business." "Immaterial," he said. "If you're going to accuse people of draining resources, it seems material to me." "You are out of order," she replied softer, and turned her body to block him from the microphone's pickup range. The camera in the ficus did not care about stagecraft. Neither did Benton, who watched without blinking. I wrote question-deflected dues. 6:22 p.m. The room was hotter now. Rain, heat, ankle, heat, argument, heat. I felt sweat tick at the back of my neck and let it be. The temptation ran its fingernail along my ribs. Stand up, say, the numbers ended here, but I pressed the heel of my hand to the page the way I used to steady a board before cutting. People hear better when the blade arrives without warning. Loretta moved to parking enforcement and clicked to a photo of a truck whose silhouette I recognized even with the plate blurred. "Habitual offenders," she said, "take advantage of our leniency. We have to protect the community." A low sound rolled from the left wall, a collective exhale. I made a new box. Parking habitual offenders. 6:29 p.m. Rhett had drifted to the aisle. His focus was down posture, rounded the picture of a kid bored by grown-up talk. His thumb edged the phone screen, and I knew he was bumping the gain up a notch to catch the softer voices near the front table. Loretta recognized a man in a golf shirt who always arrived in a good mood and left with a lot to say online. He lobbed her 3 softballs about eyesore vehicles and property values. I wrote the words and didn't add a period. Things without periods are easier to move later. The door at the back opened with a small gust and shut again, the brief clap drawing a few heads. Benton turned his wrist where his watch caught light. The leather band creaked. He looked at me across 24 shoulders and tapped his watch face once, a gentle knock against glass. Setup ready. I moved my notepad slightly to the right, the signal I'd settled on to tell Rhett we were past the point of no return. The ficus leaves did not tremble, but if you watched closely you could see the tiniest shift as the lens recentered. Before we go further, Loretta said, I need to address recent rumors. This board operates with transparency and the community's best interests at heart. Anyone suggesting otherwise is misinformed. She let her eyes move across the rows until they reached mine, then went right past me as if I were empty space. I jotted transparency claim. 6:35 p.m. Pen lifted, pen down. I did not look at the screen we would use later. I did not press my tongue to my teeth or stare at the ceiling or crack my knuckles. There is a quiet that comes before a cut when the blade and the line agree about what will happen. The room felt like that. A neighbor behind me whispered, "What if they raise dues again?" His wife whispered, "Shh." Someone coughed. Someone else unfolded a hand fan and moved it slow. Paper rustled like leaves before a storm. Loretta's bracelet touched the mic again. Click, click. She squared her papers and drew herself up. Given the ongoing non-compliance, she said the board will entertain a motion. I set the pen down and folded my hands so I wouldn't tighten them. Rhett at the aisle closed his fingers around his phone without looking. A motion, Loretta said, voice bright with resolution, to restrict parking rights for habitual offenders, effective immediately. She paused, savoring the shape of the words. All in favor, prepare to vote. Before we vote, I said, standing, there's a detail the room deserves to see. Chairs creaked. A few heads turned as if they'd heard a window open. Loretta's smile held, but a second passed before her hand left the stack of papers. I walked to the side table where the community laptop waited, breathed once to settle my voice, and plugged in the thumb drive I'd labeled with nothing at all. The projector woke with a wheeze. Fluorescent lights buzzed above us. The Texas flag in the corner hung limp, a color chart with nowhere to go. On screen, the first slide appeared, no title, no flourish, just the cover of the HOA budget report. The gold seal looked almost new in the scan, as if it had never seen a coffee cup. Page 3, I said, and clicked. Numbers resolved into neat columns. I let the page sit there until the room quieted. A few people leaned forward. Someone adjusted their glasses. I traced a line with the cursor to a row labeled Assessment by Parcel and stopped at the total beside my address. This line, I said, shows parcel contributions by lot. Mine, as you can see, represents 43% of total HOA revenue. A small sound moved through the room the way a field rustles when a breeze decides to visit. Loretta's bracelets knocked the microphone click, click, and she reached to turn the volume down as if that could dim the page. This is improper disclosure of private, she began. It's the board's own summary page, I said, keeping my tone even. Prepared, annually filed with the treasurer. I've redacted house numbers for everyone but myself. Behind the last row, the door opened with the soft push of a polite guest. Deputy Sloan Creedy stepped inside and stood along the back wall cap, in his hand's expression neutral. He didn't announce himself. Most people didn't notice. Benton did. He shifted his cane to the other hand and gave the smallest nod. I clicked again. The check image filled the screen. HOA Maintenance Reserve Payable to Loretta Kincaid Memo, Phase 2, Advance. The signature's tail pooled slightly where the pen had paused. I didn't say the amount. The numbers said themselves. We're not here to indulge conspiracy theories, Loretta said, and we will not. Benton rose a fraction from his chair, voice measured. Madam President, you'll want to let the gentleman finish. Procedure prefers completeness. She exhaled through her nose. 2 minutes, she said, crisp as a paper cut. I gestured toward the screen. The date on this check corresponds to a drop in reserves the same week. The vendor record attached to Phase 2 shows no competing bids. For the last 5 years, the grounds enhancement line item has climbed at a rate that would embarrass a hedge fund. Reserve contributions are flat or down. I didn't look at Benton, but I felt him standing beside me now, a step forward from the back row, a quiet witness. He held a thin packet of comparison charts, the kind you bring when you know someone will ask twice. He raised one page, not waving, just showing lines sloping where they should have steadied. Loretta reached for indignation. It slipped. "You have misunderstood operational flexibility," she said. "Advances are sometimes required to secure favorable terms. The board enacted measures. Do the bylaws authorize an advance from the reserve fund to the president personally?" I asked. "Can you point to the page and line, a beat?" Another. The air seemed to notice the pause and took advantage of it. A man in the second row lifted his phone. Others followed, lenses blooming like small nocturnal flowers. Rhett, by the ficus, tilted his own phone to catch both Loretta's face and the screen's lower corner, where the check number lived. Deputy Creedy cleared his throat, not loud, just enough to claim a patch of air. He spoke without moving from the wall. "For what it's worth," he said, "your bylaws. Section 4 financial controls state that reserve funds may not be disbursed to any individual officer absent a vote recorded in the minutes and a dual signature from treasurer and president." "I'm seeing one signature on that check." Murmurs thickened into sentences. "Dual signature," someone repeated. "Recorded vote." The words tried themselves on for size. Loretta's mouth found a shape it seemed to recognize, then abandoned it. "You're mischaracterizing a routine." "Then please show the minutes," Benton said, gentle as a doctor asking you to read the chart aloud. Silence has temperatures. This one cooled the room a few degrees. On the screen, the check did not blink. My own breathing sounded too loud in my ears, so I set my hand on the table and matched the rhythm to the hum of the projector fan. I clicked once more. The 5-year trend chart appeared, bars for grounds enhancement rising like a fence, the reserve contribution line as flat as a prairie horizon. "We all want our entrance to look nice," I said. "But nice has a number, and numbers should march the same direction as our rules." Loretta took a step toward the screen, then away like a person choosing whether to believe a mirror. "This is grandstanding," she said. "We came here to vote on parking enforcement. Before we vote. I said the room deserves clarity." I moved the cursor back to the line marked assessment by parcel. 43%, I repeated, not louder, not softer. "I'm not asking for favors. I'm asking for the rules we all signed to be the rules we all follow." Her voice cracked on the next syllable, a hairline fracture traveling through the word community until it failed in the middle. Phones were up now, unabashed. A woman near the aisle said, "I'm recording for my husband," and added as if to herself, "He'll want to see this." Rhett's screen lit from a notification. He didn't glance down right away, intent on holding the frame. Then his eyes flicked to the banner, widened, and he mouthed something like, "Wow." He caught my eye and angled the phone so only I could read the comment burning across the live stream. "Half the county's watching this right now." By morning, Loretta's name sat at the top of a community-wide email, temporarily stepping back from my duties due to personal matters. No apology, no particulars, just a paragraph about continuity and a promise that the board remains committed to transparency. The word read different after last night. It felt like a coat borrowed for a photo. My front porch held the kind of leftover cool you only get before Texas sun remembers its job. A neighbor had spread fresh cedar mulch. The clean, peppery smell drifted over the hedge. Rhett came out barefoot, phone in hand, scrolling through comments on the live stream. "Mrs. Davenport says her brother from Comfort watched," he said. "Someone clipped the 43% part. It's everywhere." The phone rang. "Benton, brisk. I have one more piece you'll want for the audit." 10 minutes later, he was on the steps, hat in hand, briefcase clicking open as he sat. Willa followed with lemonade in mason jars, the ice chiming like silverware. Benton laid a single contract on the table between us. He didn't narrate. He let the letterhead speak, Kincaid & Sons Landscaping, LLC. The signature block at the bottom carried a last name I already knew. His finger tapped it once a metronome for the obvious. "Nephew," he said. "Registered 3 months before Phase 1. No competitive bid sheet attached. Terms front-loaded." Willa winced. "Folks are already talking reform," she said. "Shirley on Mesquites volunteered for a committee. So did the Hinojosas. They want rules in plain English and money that can't wander off." We walked through what that meant, bylaws amended to require dual signatures and recorded votes for any reserve movement. A standing finance committee with residents who can read a balance sheet without squinting. Quarterly reports posted, not just available upon request. Benton sketched it like a carpenter marking joists measured twice so no one accidentally cuts the wrong beam. Rhett had been quiet thumb hovering over his screen as new messages popped. He looked up. "If there's restitution," he said, careful with the word, "we could bring back the scholarship Willa talked about. Bigger this time. First-gen kids. Trade school counts." He glanced at me. Name it after the community, not a person. Willa's mouth softened. I'd bake every week to fund that if I had to. Benton slid the contract into a clear sleeve and wrote a date on the tab. County will want copies, he said. And a path, not just a problem. My phone buzzed with a new text, the kind that vibrates straight through bone. It was from Deputy Creedy. County Board wants you at next week's meeting. Bring your evidence. I turned the screen so Benton could see. He nodded, once satisfied, as if the numbers had kept their promise and were finally ready to speak where it counted. The Commons wore bunting like a grin loops of red and blue, strung between oak trunks, the fabric lifting and settling in the mild autumn breeze. Folding chairs dotted the fresh-cut grass, families claiming clusters of 3 and 4. Somewhere behind the gazebo, a neighbor's smoker let out a ribbon of hickory that made the whole afternoon smell like a promise kept. A year had passed, and the ground felt different underfoot, firmer, as if trust had weight. On the podium beside the small brass microphone rested a framed copy of the budget report. The gold seal caught sunlight the way a creek catches sky. No coffee ring, no bent corner. We'd had it copied on archival stock and matted in a plain frame that didn't try to say more than it needed to. Numbers, if you treat them right, learn to stand up straight. Willa handed out lemonade as if it were policy. Benton stood with his palm on the back of my chair surveying the crowd with the contentment of a man whose sums had finally balanced. Creedy was off-duty in a soft shirt and ball cap, laughing with a pair of dads arguing good-naturedly about whether the brisket needed 5 more minutes. Kids ran figure eights between the chairs, their shadows skittering across the lawn like sparrows. I stepped to the microphone and it gave a small, courteous pop. "Thank you for being here," I said. "This time last year we were learning hard lessons about what happens when we stop paying attention. Today we get to celebrate what happens when we do." I kept it short, transparency, as habit reports posted before anyone asks a finance committee that meets with the door open and leaves with an action list instead of a mystery. "We don't promise perfection," I said, "just light and accountability. The quieter kind that shows up every quarter. Applause, warm and neighborly." Rhett joined me on stage, clutching a manila envelope that looked too big for him and somehow fit just right. He read a name, and a girl with a nervous smile and calluses on her fingertips came forward, first in her family to try college planning to study diesel engines at the trade school in Kerrville. Her mother wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, then laughed at herself and hugged Willa. Rhett handed over the check. The girl held it like a steering wheel pointed at open road. Benton came up next and, with more ceremony than I was ready for, presented the framed report to me. "For safekeeping," he said, though we both knew it belonged on the wall of the community room where everyone could see it and no one could pretend to forget. I lifted it slightly, and the seal flashed a quick, clean flare that drew a small swell from the crowd, the sound people make when an ordinary thing means more than it looks. Around us, the committee started talking about next year's sidewalk repairs, a tool share shed, a workshop on reading utility bills without getting tricked by fees. Willa had already volunteered a sign-up sheet and 3 pies. Someone tuned a guitar. The breeze shifted. The bunting brightened. Rhett edged close, his shoulder bumping mine the way it did when he was 5, and asked for another story at bedtime. I leaned toward him, keeping my voice under the hum of conversation. Turns out, numbers tell the best stories. As the sun dipped low behind the oaks, the framed budget report on the podium caught one last gentle flash, as if to nod at the road we'd taken. What was once stained and bent now stood straight, a quiet reminder that truth, when tended, holds its shape. We'd found justice without burning bridges, and in the process learned that community is less about rules on paper and more about the hands willing to hold each other accountable. Sometimes you need to lose something to see what's worth keeping. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments so we can keep the conversation going.